In the hush between tide and time, a king who would be called the Great found himself measured not by crown or court, but by grit, guile, and the slow work of rebuilding. This is the story of Alfred of Wessex, a man whose life became a turning point in the making of England. It is a story of marshland retreats and fortified towns, of burned cakes and baptismal diplomacy, of laws written with scripture in one hand and common sense in the other. It is a story about how a beleaguered ruler transformed defeat into design and chaos into a blueprint for nationhood. Alfred was born in 849, in a world of small kingdoms, shifting loyalties, and longships slicing foggy horizons. The youngest son of Ethelwulf of Wessex and Osber, Alfred might have been destined for a quiet life in cloistered study rather than the bloody business of kingship. Yet the same beginnings that could have sheltered him from politics also nurtured one of his defining traits, a hunger for learning. Stories from his youth paint him not as a fierce warrior first, but as a curious mind, reciting poetry and devoting hours to study, unusual, invaluable qualities when the storms of history arrived. From 865 onward, the great heathen army moved like an unstoppable tide across the east and north. One by one, Northumbria, East Anglia, and Mercia buckled under the Viking onslaught. By the time Alfred's older brother Ethelred took on the crown, Wessex faced the same shadow. Battles came in quick succession. The young Alfred learned the cost of war on the field of Ashdown and in the lost ground that followed. When Ethelred died in 871, Alfred became king at about 21, inheriting a kingdom on the brink. The early years of Alfred's reign were a grind against survival. 9 major clashes in 1 year. Temporary truces, sharp defeats, and the constant pressure of a foe who seemed to thrive on mobility. Alfred's early response mixed force with prudence, fighting when needed, negotiating when forced. He paid tribute to buy space and time. Yet few of those measures addressed the core vulnerability, an enemy who struck from water and could vanish into light coastal mists. The nadir came in 878. A surprise winter strike at Chippenham shattered the fragile peace. The court scattered. Many leaders submitted to the Vikings, and Alfred fled with a loyal handful to the marshes of Somerset. History and legend both cradle this moment. The famous tale of burnt cakes, where a disguised Alfred lets bread char while he listens in silence to a humble woman's scolding, belongs more to the imagination of later centuries than to contemporary record. Yet even if the story reads like folklore, it captures a truth. The king was, for a time, reduced to living like the common folk, learning the rhythms of fear and endurance firsthand. From that low place, Alfred began the steady work of returning his kingdom to strength. He gathered loyal the GNS across Somerset, Wiltshire, and Hampshire. He summoned the FYRD, the militia of free men, not as a one-off horde but as a resource to be organized. He chose a meeting place and a plan: regroup, strike, and win the day that would change everything. At Edington, in May of 878, the turning came. Alfred's reconstituted forces confronted Guthrum's army and routed it. The victory carried consequences beyond battlefield glory. The defeated Guthrum sued for peace, accepted baptism with Alfred as his godfather, and retreated. The treaty that followed, the seeds of what later historians call the Danelaw, recognized a partition. On one side, Viking-controlled lands, on the other, the surviving Anglo-Saxon heartlands. For Alfred, this was not total victory, but it was survival with terms. He had bought breathing space, and he would not squander it. Alfred's true genius showed in how he used that time. He did not simply wait for luck, he rearranged the world. He reorganized the FYRD so that half the men stood ready while the other half tended the fields, an elegant answer to the twin demands of defense and agriculture. The kingdom would not starve to pay for security, nor would fields go fallow while raiders roamed. More visibly, Alfred created a network of fortified towns, burhs, spaced so that no part of Wessex lay more than a day's march from refuge. These burhs were more than defensive walls. They were administrative centers, marketplaces, and the scaffolding of a state that expected to last. The burgle Heidage, a sort of inventory of these strongholds and their maintenance obligations, reveals the scale of coordination required. It was a kingdom thinking in systems rather than just in campaigns. Alfred also turned his eye to the sea. Vikings had dominated the waves. He would meet them there. He commissioned larger, sturdier ships to chase raiders before they could land, seeding the idea of an English navy long before such a force was common. Successes were mixed and setbacks occurred, but the message mattered. England would not be passive beneath foreign oars. If Alfred's military reforms secured the body of the kingdom, his cultural reforms nourished its soul. He believed that warfare alone could not bind a people together. Learning did that. Monasteries, once the arteries of literacy and learning, had been plundered. Latin, the language of church and law, had become a closed code to many. Alfred proposed a radical notion, that the essential works of faith and wisdom should speak in the language of the people. He brought scholars, homegrown and continental, into his court. Asser, a Welsh cleric, became a chronicler of these times. Plegmund rose to Canterbury. John the Old Saxon and Grimbald added continental learning. Together, under Alfred's guidance, they translated key texts into Old English, Pope Gregory's Pastoral Care, Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, passages of Augustine, and more. These were not sterile translations. Alfred's hand appears in him, shaping interpretation and making the text serve the needs of a kingdom seeking stability and piety.